Hello, YouTube family. Vanessa here. I want to come here and share how God has helped me to turn my bitterness into my betterness. So, yes, I am a content creator, but I'm a real one. And I want to come here to be real and not a facade and be real like I always do. But, God, I've spoken many times about the spiritual and emotional growths that God always builds me up and God always helps me be aware of things and aware of myself and aware of my flaws and aware of my goods and my bads and aware of things I need to change about myself personally or mentally or, just interacting. So I am a person that prides myself in taking accountability as a person, taking accountability as a woman, taking accountability as a wife, taking accountability as a mother. I pride myself in that and just learning. Now, disclaimer, this is not tea. This is not, me spread my business or anything like that. Focus on what God is doing. Focus on that. Usually I don't get here and, speak too much about my marriage or my relationship or stuff like that. But I want to point out how God helps me in that too. And, like I say, I like to be aware. I like to be a woman that is aware. So I realize that, you know, even though I've grown a whole lot over the years of me being, an adult and I've gone through different journeys and just growing mentally, spiritually, and physically, that there are still some things that, I had to grow from. And, I feel like a lot of people sometimes get on here and, they don't really speak about that, like how you have to continuously grow. You know, God is in your life and, you know, you pray as much as you can, but you have to continuously grow because there are continuously different things in life where, you got to be aware of. And, you know, I've grown as a woman, I've grown as a wife, and just as a person. And, I came to the conclusion just recently that I was like, you know what, God, I feel like I have some bitterness. I feel like, you know, I have some forgiveness issues. And those come out when I'm upset. Things that I feel like, haven't been dealt with, things that I feel like maybe haven't been acknowledged the way I want them to be acknowledged. When I get upset, all those things fly out. And so, with in my marriage and with my husband in particularly, and like I say, disclaimer, this is not tea, this is not telling business or anything. And also this has nothing to do with infidelity because that's a whole nother thing when you talk about forgiveness when it comes to marriages. But I felt like, I had some bitterness within me. And, you know, when me and my husband would get into a disagreement, I would drag all of this stuff from, when we first started dating and all of this stuff from, before we got married and when we first got married and, what happened 2 years ago and what happened 5 years ago, what happened 10 years ago. And me and my husband, we've been together for 15 years. We're 35 now. We've been together. We met at 19 and we've been together since we were 20 years old. So, we've been through a whole lot, and I figured that I would get upset with him and drag all this stuff and be like, well, you was like this, you said this when we were dating, and you were like this and that and all this other type of stuff, and just dragging it all in and grouping it all together. Things that, I've even forgiven him about, or things that he's said that I've forgiven him about, and I group it all together. And, well, you've always been this way of this and that, and that's why you act like this, and that's why you act like that. And it would just all come out, and I would sound so bitter about it. And I had to, you know, realize, like, you're dragging up all of this stuff from years ago, things that you said you forgiven about. You know, there are things that you have said that wasn't the best. There are ways that you have acted, you have an attitude, and stuff like that. Look at those things also. But, when you get upset at him, you're dragging all of this stuff and what he said 10 years ago and what he said 5 years ago, and feeling like it wasn't acknowledged the way you wanted to be acknowledged, and just sounding so bitter in it and just going at him and everything else. And at the end of the day, when everything is all said and done, you feel bad because you, like, yes, maybe the situation or whatever could have been his fault, or however you feel, but all of that garbage wasn't even necessary for this situation. Like, you've turned, a level 2 into a level 100 by bringing in all this, stuff, and grouping everything together, and, just all of this stuff. And I would say, like, for years, like, I've kind of done that. Even throughout, my throughout me being my journey of being, a better person and growing and being just an evolution, I still had those things, like, inside of me. And this is a true story. This is just recently. Like, you know, me and him had a disagreement, and I turned into a whole different person, and, like, going at him, and, this and that, and he said this and this and that, and, you never, and all this other type of stuff from years ago. Just a bunch of, and I'm making myself upset, like, about old stuff. And, you know, I've even prayed about this before. I said, God, I feel like I have a forgiveness issue. But I'm the type of person, I write things down of, like, God, heal me from this, heal me from that. But it wasn't just a forgiveness issue. It was also, I figured out, like, it was a bitterness issue of, you know, my forgiveness came with an anchor of, yeah, you forgive, but you drag down because you still have the bitterness of, you know, dragging things on of, like, when you first started dating, and stuff like that. And because, to you, it feels like it wasn't acknowledged, or it feels like y'all disagreements sound like another disagreement that you had, and stuff like that. Over the years, I have, just me growing and things like that. Over the years, like, I apologize to my husband a lot. And, I feel like, as a woman, they say women we're more emotional, which we are. But they also say women aren't accountable, which I don't agree with that, because I try my best to be accountable. Over the years, I've tried, my best in being apologetic, not being that woman that is not accountable, whether it's my fault or not, but me yelling and screaming and dragging all this old stuff on doesn't make it any better. I had to think about that. Like, I was like, God, I feel so bitter. I feel bitter. Like, and this bitterness is weighing me down. Like, I can't, you know, pray to you, God, and be like, help me to forgive when I'm forgiving. And like I say, like the forgiveness got an anchor on it. And, I want to be accountable. I don't want to be just a woman. I don't want to just be a wife. I want to be an accountable woman, an accountable wife to, say I'm wrong. And, I'm dragging this on. My attitude right now is something that it doesn't even require, the attitude I have is not even required for this situation. I feel like, I can't use that excuse of, oh, well, I'm a woman and women are, more emotional and things just come out. I don't want to use that as an excuse. And also, let me say this. This is not, you know, for views, for brownie points, for, me taking the side of men, taking the side of women, me wanting to look good and, and gain the favoritism of a woman, gain the favoritism of men or whichever. Like I say, I'm coming here to be real. I evaluate myself every day. I evaluate who I am, and God helped me to do it. And so in the midst of all this, and like I said, I just had this epitome just recently of how bitter I sound and how much bitter I had in my heart just recently. And I had to sit down and I was like, you know what, God, I'm going to backtrack and not just forgive, but I'm going to give it all to you, God. I'm going to backtrack. I'm going to go in the garbage and sift through it and break it down. I'm going to give you why I feel this way. I'm going to give you why, I've had the bitter feelings. I'm going to give you why. And I'm going to break it down and what I can do better. And I'm going to release it to you. And I thought of it like a jar of a closed jar of butterflies. And each thing I was bitter about, I broke it down and I just let it fly out the jar. This prayer that I prayed was probably over 2 hours. And I broke it down, and I broke it a 15-year down. I broke it down from, the time that we started dating. I broke it down from, everything that we've been through, all the times I was upset, all the feelings that I harbored, all the, the things I was upset if he said to me or how he acted or whatever, or a situation I feel like that he didn't deal with the way I want him to deal with or whatever. I broke it down and verbatim. I said, God, I didn't sugarcoat it. I said, God, I am bitter. I didn't say I feel bitter. I said, God, I am bitter. No sugarcoating, no sweeping under the rug. God, I'm bitter. And I said, God, my bitterness comes from this. And, dot, dot, dot. And from this situation, my bitterness comes from this situation. God, my bitterness comes from how this was said. God, my bitterness comes from when this was done. God, my bitterness comes from, the year this happened. God, my bitterness comes from I was hurt when he said this to me. God, my bitterness comes from my anger. God, my bitterness comes from, This wasn't acknowledged when I wanted to be acknowledged. God, my bitterness comes from this. I said this verbatim for every single thing that I held in my heart of unforgiveness and bitterness against my husband. And God, this is where the bitterness comes from. And after each statement, I said, God, I release it to you. And like I said, it was like a jar. Every time I said I release it to you, it was like a butterfly, a lift. The jar of, the jar of the closed butterflies that couldn't get out. And I said, God, everything I release to you, God. God, I don't need him to acknowledge it, God. I don't need him to acknowledge it. All I need is to release it to you and for you to acknowledge it. God, I don't want to keep living and being upset about things that happened 8 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, every time I'm upset. And all of these things just come up. God, I feel like the devil is using me, using my bitterness. And when they say, forgiveness is for you, it is. Because when I tell you, I felt like every time I got, super upset at my husband, all these things will come out and I will group them all together and be like, that's why I feel this type of way because this happened. Literally, I felt like the devil was just playing me like a fiddle. Like, yeah, you still got bitterness about this. So bring this out and talk about this and just lash out and everything else. And, I had to break it down. I felt like this was something I had to do. I was like, God, I got to break all this down. I'm going to have to go under the rug, go in the garbage can. I'm going to have to revisit some stuff that happened back in the day in order for me to bring it up and bring it out. Because I feel like it's poisoning me. And yes, I'm a person that, preaches about, guidance and preaches about, being better and everything else and evolving. But I'm like, God, I still got stuff I got to evolve from. There is never a time where you are too righteous, you are too healed to not keep healing. I believe that. I believe there is never a time that you don't need to keep healing. As a person, as people, personally, to just keep healing. And, I even made a quote about it of saying, healing and forgiveness is good, but it's with an anchor. And this made me understand my own quote. The forgiveness was with an anchor because I still had bitterness behind it. And, I had to revisit all of these things and be like, yes, some of these situations, disagreements and stuff may have been his fault. But am I going to keep living in it? Am I going to keep living in, this wrong or this disagreement was his fault because we had this agreement or, this or that? Am I going to keep, living in it? And I decided no. I said, God, if I'm going to be upset about something, I want to be upset about what's in the present. I don't want to keep being upset about what's in the past. If I'm going to be upset about a disagreement that we have now, I want to be upset about that disagreement. I don't want to be upset about a disagreement that, even if it's similar to what we're having now, and then I just bunch all this stuff together and all of this stuff of, like I say, 5, 10 years ago, and be mad about it all over again because I felt like, maybe it wasn't acknowledged. Maybe, we moved on from it, and maybe I didn't move on. Maybe he moved on from it, or whichever. And, I had to be real with myself, like I always am. And I'm the type of person I come on here and I encourage because I have to encourage myself. I motivate because I have to motivate myself, but I also am a real person. I also have flaws. I also think the wrong way sometimes. I say the wrong thing. I feel the wrong thing in my heart. Sometimes I make the wrong decision sometimes. As a person, as a woman, as a wife, as a parent. This is the raw and this is the real. And I feel like it makes me better when I'm real with myself and especially real with God. When I pray to God, I lay everything down, my flaws, the good, the bad. I talk to God like an actual person. Like, and when I said I came to God like, God, I'm bitter. I don't sugarcoat. I don't sugarcoat with God because I don't feel like I have to. You know, even coming on here, sometimes, even though I'm a real person, sometimes you want to keep things to yourself. You want to keep your life sometime private. I don't get on here and spread my whole life and this is even new to me. I rarely even talk about my relationship or like my marriage or stuff like that because I like to keep some things, separate and some things of just, healing on my own or healing with my spouse and stuff like that. And I'm against, sometimes people coming on here and just spreading their whole life and just everything and this and that and not having any discretion, but that's them. I don't judge, but me personally, you know, I want to have some things private, but I want to be real also. I want to be real about me being accountable, holding myself accountable as a woman because, and as a wife. And like I say, I apologize to my husband. Even after this prayer that I had with God, I had come back and I said, I'm sorry because I have lived with bitterness for years. And this ain't the first time I've apologized to my husband, like I say, but I had to apologize for this of my bitterness. And whether, I felt like, some of the things is his fault because I'm taking accountability for me. I'm not taking accountability for him. I'm taking accountability for me. And, that's what I feel like forgiveness is all about. And, you know, like I say, it's a thing that I hear of saying women aren't accountable. And I say I am accountable. And sometimes I feel like when I say that, some people like, oh, you just, no, I am. I am an accountable woman. I am a wife and a woman and a mother that holds herself accountable. And, I'm not always right. My emotions sometimes are not always right. My attitude sometimes is not always right. I say this to myself. I say this to God. And, you know, it's freeing when you can let these things go. And I said, God, not only do I want you to help me to let it go, help me to not bring it back up again. When I get upset about my husband about something, I don't want to revisit this junk. I don't want to revisit this, the anchor and the bitterness and bunching everything together. I want to be upset for what happens right then and there. I don't want to revisit this, God. I don't. Turn my bitterness into my betterness. And let all the butterflies fly. Let all the butterflies fly. I no longer want to be a butterfly in a closed jar. And my other butterflies, that's a part of me, of my growth and my journey and everything else, due to being bitter about old stuff. But I just want it to be a part of my growth. Want to be a part of my growth. And of all, because growth, like I say, is always a journey. I'm always saying I'm always upgrading. And this was a thing that I needed to upgrade on. It definitely was. It definitely was. I said this many a times, like, God, I don't know why, I have such an issue with, forgiveness with certain things and, especially with my husband and stuff like that. And, but I was bitter. And I had to call it the way it is. And I had to be an accountable woman, an accountable wife, and take responsibility for me and my feelings and my emotions, and not use this, I'm a woman thing, and, I'm a woman emotionally. So, women, we just let stuff fly and this and that. I can't use that as an excuse. I have to be an accountable woman, period. So let's all be accountable women. And, just not be bitter about old stuff. And, I say, let God heal you. I got to let God heal me all the time. All the time. Let God heal you. And like I say, like, this is real. This is a true story. This is just recently of me realizing how bitter I am, in my relationship and how marriage. But let's change to how bitter I am, how bitter I used to be. Because, this is going to be an ongoing thing that I'm going to work on. Every time I even, get upset about something, if the inkling even come in my mind, if the devil even try to, this happened, nope. God has freed me from that, and I want to stay free. I want to stay free. But like I always say, keep your mental healthy and keep accountability as a woman. Don't use bitterness as an excuse. Don't use emotions as an excuse. Keep your mental healthy and just grow and just evolve. And even though things aren't always acknowledged, don't allow it to drag you down and be an anchor to you. That is what forgiveness is about. Keep your mental healthy, and I'm going to keep my mental healthy. But I thank you for anybody watching. I thank you for, basically, I can call this my TED Talk. I thank you for being here with me in my journey. I thank you. I thank you if you understand. I thank you if you don't understand. But I just thank you. And I thank God. Keep your mental healthy.